Good afternoon. Just to let you know, the governor's running a little late. We're trying to get the superintendent online. He's on the road, the treasurer's on the road, but I have not heard from him as of yet. So hopefully we'll be going here in just a few minutes.
Can you hear me, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, I can. Is this Ben?
Yes, sir. We got you on.
Okay, so all right, do I just keep myself muted until I need to speak? Is that what you guys prefer? Yes, I can. Is this Ben?
Yep, that'd be great. We got you on.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready to go.
Hello. I must have the wrong video. Well, I do. Governor Gordon's on in 2 places. All right. Can you hear us?
We can hear you, sir.
You can. Good. All right. Well, thank you. We'll try to get a little better. That's there. All right, so I have Auditor Racinas and Secretary Buchanan. Is that the superintendent there as well?
Yes, it is, Mr. Governor. I'm here.
Okay. Do we have the treasurer? I don't see that we have the treasurer. So I'm joined here obviously by Director Scoggin and Amanda and Beth, and in the corner is Betsy. So Director, let me turn this over to you. So.
Okay.
Oops.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This meeting is noticed as a special meeting for the State Loan and Investment Board. We have 2 policy matters to address today in C1 and C2. The purpose of the meeting is to address a couple of issues arising from the board's new role as an authorizer of certain charter schools, resulting from the legislature passing the 2021 session laws, chapter 169. In this new role, the Slib can participate in the approval monitoring, and renewal of charter school applications and operations. The first issue that we'll address is in C1, and that concerns the board's collection of fees related to charter school application and monitoring. The second issue concerns how the SLIB will function in its role as an authorizer of charter schools. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would direct everybody to Board Matters C1. It's to consider adoption of emergency rules for State Loan and Investment Board, Chapter 14, fees for administrative services and interest rates, and to consider authorizing the Office of State Lands and Investments to proceed with the regular rulemaking process for Chapter 14. As I mentioned, the 2021 legislation, which is specifically now shown in Wyoming Statute 21.3.302.1, provides that administration fees necessary to recover the incremental costs of the Department of Education related to the approval and monitoring of charter schools will be collected by the SLIB and deposited in the school foundation program account. The SLIB's current rules do not address the collection of fees related to charter schools, so Chapter 14 of the SLIB's rules must be amended in order to allow for this process. Pursuant to recently approved final rules promulgated by the Department of Education, acceptance of applications for new charter schools will commence on Friday, July 15th. So in order for the board to begin the collection of fees related to charter schools when the application period commences, the board must adopt emergency rules. And then for the long-term ongoing administration, the board must also commence the regular rulemaking process to continue collecting the charter school fees. The Office of State Lands and Investments, we've been in discussion with the Department of Education for some time related to this issue. The SLIB's role as an authorizer of charter schools is new. Both the department and OSLI are continuing to work together to understand what the fees and the collection process are going to look like. So we tried to build in some flexibility as the program progresses. So if you turn to the proposed changes to Chapter 14, the changes can be found in Section 1 and Section 2B. In Section 1, the only thing we've added in Section 1 is the reference to Wyoming Statute 21-3-302.1C, which is the board's authority to collect the charter school related fees. And then in Section 2B, we've added language that provides the board shall collect fees incurred by the Department of Education related to the approval and monitoring of charter schools pursuant to Wyoming Statute 21-3-302.1C. We believe this language is broad enough to cover the fees envisioned by the legislature to be collected, and the direct reference to the statute also then encompasses the limitation in the statutes on the collection of the fees. It's limited to the amount, it cannot exceed 3% of the annual state funding for the charter school. So we think that even though the language seems a little broad, that statutory reference is necessary to capture that limitation. So it's our recommendation that the board first find that emergency rules are necessary to allow for the collection of fees incurred by the Department of Education for charter school applications submitted in 2022. And if the board makes this finding, the board adopt the draft emergency rules for Chapter 14, fees for administrative services and interest rates attached to Board Matter C1, and also authorize the Office of State Lands and Investments to begin the regular rulemaking process with the draft Chapter 14 rules, which are also attached to Board Matters C1. And I would note that we do have folks from the Department of Education here. I think Bill Pennell and Sean McInerney, can't say that correctly, my apologies. I think they're on the Zoom and are here to answer any questions about perhaps their rules and anything else related to charter schools at this point. So with that.
Well, thank you. And I note for the record that Treasurer Meyer has joined. Board, I think it does appear to me that the statute does require these rules, but for the Department of Education, I don't know if you have any comments that you'd like to make before we begin in that process. So let me recognize you.
Thank you. Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Are there members of the board that want to address this issue? This is the one that's statutory. So, yes, Secretary Buchanan.
Thank you, Governor, Mr. Chairman. I'll make the motion perhaps in a moment, but my question is in looking at all the materials I've tried to gather for today, is there any precedent for what incremental fees are? And if we adopt these rules, do we have any idea what they would be in maybe just a short time period when we are going to be required to consider these applications?
Madam Director.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary, OSLI, we've been in discussions with the Department of Education because we ourselves are not quite sure what that looks like. Initially, when we talked to them a couple months ago, it was unclear whether or not there would be sort of an application fee when people submit their applications. And of course, any application fee would have to coincide with whatever costs there might be in processing that and review of that application. The last time I spoke to the Department of Education, Mr. Auer, I don't believe that they were thinking that there would be an application fee now, but the other fees would be related to the ongoing monitoring and that sort of thing. I think that incremental fees language that comes from the statute itself. And so that's why, as I mentioned, Mr. Secretary, we're still trying to sort through all the fees, if you will, with the Department of Education. That's why we tried to make the language broad enough to encompass whatever this is going to look like. This is a new role for the board. And so we're trying to be a little bit flexible here. And perhaps the department has some further input on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I guess I don't know the protocol. I guess I'll address Mr. Governor. The initial application we have handled internally without, there will be no fees attached to that. However, as you look at the ongoing monitoring of charter schools, in talking to other charter school authorizers, they say, particularly in the first 2 years of operation, fairly frequent monitoring of their programmatic and financial monitoring to make sure that everything's going well with them is best practice. And so we will have to discuss after we know how many applications we have, how many new charter schools and all that, what that exactly needs to look like. I'm assuming it'll look something like the district accreditation process. Yet, at the very least, we would probably need to go outside of the department for contractors, potentially. I guess I can't speak for sure, but certainly there's a case for collecting the fees.
So let me ask you, and forgive me, I don't know who is addressing us, but the question I have is that there are some states that have a third-party authorizer. Is that what you were perhaps alluding to? Was essentially a contract arrangement to look at that, or were you thinking of trying to figure out what our costs were and keeping it more or less aligned with what processing and monitoring would cost?
I certainly had not considered the idea of a third-party authorizer.
Okay.
I was, I guess, thinking more like that there may be aspects of charter school monitoring that we would need, though, to, for example, none of us on our team have the skills to do the financial monitoring part of that, because that's not done by the Department of Ed. Facilities might be another area.
Sure. Okay. Very good.
Thank you. Bill Panel, by the way, is who's speaking.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Secretary, it was your question that led to that.
Yes, thank you. And I think where we are now is appropriate, and I just wondered if anybody had any ideas on that. And if I may ask a second question, because I think it's probably just as appropriate now to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I see the auditor has her hand up as well. So first, please proceed, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Governor, Mr. Chairman. So my other question was in reviewing the emergency rules aspect, and I know we had some conversations on this with regard to the waivers. I didn't see anything either in the emergency rules or I don't think I saw it in the draft policy either. But from the way I read the statute and the Department of Education rules, the State Board of Education set out, I think there are 8 eligible waivers, they call it. And it looks like the board also, the state board is also the ones that have to ultimately approve that. So the way I understand the process from reading this is the application will come to us and there may be a request for waivers in there. Am I wrong to suggest that ultimately it goes back to the state board to approve those waivers? And if so, would we want something in here initially that says we would approve the application conditioned upon final approval of the requested waiver? Or do I have that process backwards? Does Slib authorize the waiver request as the authorizer?
I can answer this. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had to unmute. Secretary Buchanan, we went back and forth on that to say, okay, if, for example, if there were, say, 20 different charter school applications, and then they all went to the state board to get their waiver requests approved before they had even been approved by the authorizer, that it would put an undue amount of work on the state board to approve a bunch of. So the thought is that the authorizer approves the application, then they take the waiver request to the state board, and if they can't live without the waiver request, then it's kind of a case where they get to decide whether or not they want to open a charter school or not.
Thank you, Bill. And I think the secretary and I did chat briefly about this. And I guess, you know, I kind of share, I think, your concern, Secretary, that they ought to at least give some indication about what waivers they might have. Now, my understanding, and Betsy just handed me, there are looks like about 8 waivers that are eligible. One, proposed charter school guarantees textbooks and instructional resources will be provided to the students free of charge. 2, the proposed charter school guarantees that the flags of the United States of America and the state of Wyoming will be displayed when school is in session, in, upon, and around each school building. 3, the proposed charter school guarantees that internet access will be provided in the school. 4, the proposed charter school guarantees all teachers and leaders will be evaluated at least once annually using a process conforming to the Wyoming Department of Education Chapter 29 rules. 5, the proposed charter school guarantees the school will meet the minimum hours of pupil-teacher contact time. 6, the proposed charter school guarantees the school will operate at least 175 pupil-teacher contact days and 185 operational days, or will receive approval from the State Board of Education for an alternative schedule. 7, The proposed charter school would adhere to scheduled holidays and appropriately recognized days of observance and mourning. And 8, the proposed charter school will guarantee temporary school closures for inclement weather will be reported to the Department of Education. Those are the eligible waivers.
And so, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and so it would be, as the good gentleman from the Department of Education mentioned, the way the process would work is they would come to us for the approval. And of course, if we don't approve it, then I guess it stops there. But we would have to have something, it seems like in our policy, and this is what I think you mentioned at one point, was a conditional approval, because they have to wait to get the final word back from the state board as to whether or not this, even though they've been listed as eligible waiver requirement or waivers, there still has to be a final approval. And it sounds like they have to go back to the state board before moving forward. So I just wondered if there was something in the policy or in the rules that would say that we would condition approval upon that piece of the process, or if maybe it's not even necessary. I just put that out there.
Well, and Mr. Secretary, I guess my thinking is that the statute allows us to collect fees, and that's what the rules deal with, unless I'm incorrect. The policy is that other set of questions that we're exploring now. So any follow-up on that? Okay, I see the auditor, and then I have the treasurer next. Auditor Racinas.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize if this is a silly question. So I was wondering, it sounds like the Department of Education is not decided whether they will collect fees or not. And so I was wondering if the new rule shouldn't say may collect instead of shall collect, but it appears that the statute says we shall collect. So there's just to be clear, and please correct me if I'm thinking of this poorly, we don't have the option of collecting fees or not, because the statute says we shall figure out a fee and we shall collect it. Is that, and that may be a question for Jim, but whoever would like to answer it, thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
I can try to take a stab at that, Madam Auditor. You're correct that the reason for the language in the proposed rule change is shall, is because that's what the statute says. And it's my understanding that the department through the Slib will collect whatever their incremental expenses are related to the ongoing monitoring piece. So there will at a minimum be that. It's just with respect to an application fee. I think the board had determined, or the board, excuse me, the department had determined that they could absorb that, the cost of that in turn.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Is that Superintendent Schrader?
Yes, but let Treasurer Meyer go first. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the question I have, as you read those 8 eligible waivers, I was trying to find anything that the department would look at specifically that would rule those waivers I guess out of order or I guess denied. And my question is, I guess on the statute, I apologize for not reading the statute, is there anything clearly states that the department is the entity which approves the eligible waivers? And as definitive as the shall that the Slib board shall collect the fees in the statute.
Mr. Treasurer, if I understand your question, I believe that the waivers have to be approved by the Board of Education, but they are constrained by the Department of Education. Is that a fair statement of the issue here? And maybe that would be, or Pat.
I can comment on that. The reason why the list has waivers that can be approved and waivers that can't is the law has a extensive list of waivers that can't be, things that statutes that can't be waived, things that have to do with health and safety, things that have to do with standards, accountability, and so on. So the Attorney General went through and said, okay, so then what can be waived out of all of that? And came up with those 8 that can be waived. So then the request would go to the state board to have them waived with their plan. If you're not going to operate for 175 days a year, then what's your day going to look like? How are you going to meet the hour requirements? Things like that.
I see. Thanks, Bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess to clarify the process, when these come before us, I guess the issues that cannot be waived have already been addressed, and they've been found to be eligible to go to the next step, which is board. We charge the fees, and then at that point in time, on the eligible waived ones, we're required to waive them or not waive them. Is that how the process is going to work?
I think, Treasurer, that, at least in my estimation, that is a matter for policy, because we don't have statutory guidance on that, nor rulemaking authority.
So the department has already determined that these, through their process, that these 8 are waivable, but they haven't determined who is going to waive them. Is that where we're contemplating the next step, or?
Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
Madam Director.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the Board of Education is the only authority that can waive those waivable requests per Department of Ed rules, I think. With respect to the board, I think how we envisioned this is that the complete applications would come to the board, and they would, make their case, if you will, for the charter school, let the board know if they have waiver requests that will be made. And then we thought that the board could conditionally approve it, pending the determination of the Board of Education on the waivers.
Mr. Chair, may I add something?
Please.
This is Elaine. So that's right. Those waivers will go to the State Board of Education for approval, and that is in statute. The Slib board will have in the application a list of those requested waivers. So the board will know ahead of time what those charter school, which waivers they will be seeking. And then my understanding is once the application is approved and those waivers are either approved or denied by the state board, that will all be addressed in the contract between the Slib board and the charter.
Okay, so that should clarify to the best of our ability the process at this point. Superintendent Schrader.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So just for clarification, my question is regarding those 8 points, the 8 eligible waivers. Are we saying these charter school applications that are coming down the pike are going to be requesting those 8 eligible waivers? That they will be, or they might be?
Might is the operative word.
And they might be. Okay. So we don't know necessarily at this point how many of those 8 eligible waivers the charter schools will be requesting, if any. Is that correct?
That is correct. My presumption would be that if a charter school approached the board, they would want to say, these are the waivers we would, or we would,
And,
what waivers would you anticipate?
okay, and just to be crystal clear, if they do decide to request any of those are the only waivers they're eligible to request. Am I understanding that correctly?
Not being an attorney, but I think that was the statutory read from the Attorney General's office, that the authorizing piece of legislation actually only allowed for these to be exempted
Right.
from statute.
Okay, and then one more question, Mr. Chairman, regarding what Elaine said, again, just to be clear in my mind, she is saying, forgive me, was she saying per statute or per policy, the waivers will go before the State Board of Education, not the Slib Board? Is that correct?
Per,
The request for the waivers would go before the State Board of Education?
that is correct.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all.
Okay. So I still think that we have before us the practical matter of allowing for the collection of fees. And then I think we have the subsequent matter that we've kind of delved a little bit into, which is policy. And so just for the practical matter of the collection of fees, is there any further comment or discussion about the proposed emergency rules authorizing the collection of fees versus the Department of Education? I don't hear any. So if that's the case, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we accept the director's recommendation regarding 3 points. Do I need to read all 3 of them?
No, I think the director's recommendation is probably good enough. Unless, Director, do you want to?
Just one question. Governor, did you want to take any comment
Oh,
on this, or did
okay.
you want to wait till the very end?
Hold on just a second, Superintendent. I think the point's well taken. I don't know if we have anybody from the public online. Can the host check to see if anyone from the public would like to comment on this?
Mr. Chairman, it does not appear that we have any hands up at the moment.
Thank you very much. All right, now it's in order, Superintendent. You would move the director's recommendation.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would move the director's recommendation on all 3 points.
I would
Okay.
second, Chairman.
Okay, it's been moved by the superintendent and seconded by the treasurer. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye or a thumbs up if you're on the screen.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Director. And now I will turn it over to you for the policy discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last issue before the board today is Board Matter C2, and it's to consider adoption of the State Loan and Investment Board's proposed charter school policy and procedures. As I think we've mentioned earlier today, unfortunately, during the 2021 general session, when the legislature passed the 2021 session laws, Chapter 169 related to charter schools, it appears that the State Loan and Investment Board was not provided with rulemaking authority to promulgate rules to set forth its internal procedures related to its new role as an authorizer for charter schools. So in order to assist applicants with enough detail to understand how the SLIB will consider charter school applications, OSLI believes the board may wish to consider adoption of statements of general policy in order to guide the applicants. And again, while these policies would not have the legal status of rules, they could be helpful in clarifying the SLIB's view of its new role as an authorizer. OSLI did meet with the Department of Education and with both of the agency's AG representatives, and we collaborated on the proposed draft policies and procedures that are attached to Board Matter C2. And so I'll just give you a high level of what that looks like. Under the proposed policy and procedures, the charter school applications would be received by the Department of Education and reviewed for completeness, compliance with accreditation requirements and any other statutory requirements. The department would then notify the applicants within 30 days of submission whether the application is complete or incomplete. For applications deemed complete, the Department of Education would submit a report to the SLIB and provide a preliminary recommendation of each charter school application reviewed within 30 days after the application is deemed complete. The applications would be considered at a future SLIB meeting. We note that there would be the possibility of special SLIB meetings if necessary to consider the applications. We believe that incomplete applications would also have to be presented to the SLIB with an unfavorable recommendation. And therefore, if that happens, there would be no required interview or public hearing to be conducted. For complete applications, the SLIB would conduct the interview and the public hearing together, if you will, at the SLIB meeting. Essentially how we envision that is that the applicant would provide a presentation to the SLIB describing their project and all the important specific aspects of it. Then the SLIB would have an opportunity to question the applicants. The Department of Education would assist the SLIB by providing a list of essentially standard questions that would be asked of all applicants. And then the SLIB members could also ask additional questions of the applicants that may be outside of those standard questions. Then after that interview process occurred, the public comment would be opened. Only verbal comments would be heard by the SLIB. Comments would be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Each speaker could address the SLIB once to avoid repetitive comments. SLIB could ask the applicant to respond to any questions or comments received by the public. Then the SLIB could consider the application, the interview, and the public hearing when making its final decision to approve or deny each application. Once the SLIB makes its determination, the Department of Education would provide to OSLI the charter contract for each SLIB approved applications. And as was mentioned, any of the waivers that were ultimately approved by the Board of Education could be addressed in that charter contract. We believe the charter contract would be signed by the charter school applicant, the Department of Education, the director of OSLI, and the chairman of the SLIB. Then after a charter school has been authorized by the SLIB and has been in operation for 1 year or has been renewed by the SLIB, SLIB may eventually delegate to the school district where the charter school operates any of the functions of the authorizer, so long as the charter school and the school district approve the delegation of the functions, and the charter school will retain the right to seek renewal of the charter from the SLIB. We did have some discussions about how to address the waiver issue and whether or not that needed to be in the policy. We didn't necessarily think it needed to be, but if the board would like to do that, we could certainly do that. The director recommendation here is that the board approve the charter school policy and procedures attached to Board Matter C2 with an effective date of today, July 13th. However, we recognize these are sort of high-level points, and this is certainly a starting place, and the board can certainly add to or make any changes that it would like to this. Also, if the board felt that it wanted some more time to consider it, we do have another special SLIB meeting scheduled for July 21st to address those local government ARPA rules. So, we could provide some additional time. We also have a regular SLIB meeting set for August 4th, but we believe time is of the essence since the application period for the charter schools will commence on Friday, so probably should, we would suggest resolve the policies in the near future. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Madam Director. Are there any questions? I have the secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Governor. Just real quick, so it looks like we contemplate 30 days for DOE to determine whether or not the application is complete. Then they have another 30 days to submit a preliminary recommendation and a report. So that's 60 days there. That's number one. Am I understanding that correctly? And then on the second point, as to whether or not we should include waiver language in the policy, are there any timelines related to once we approve an application for the State Board of Education, if there are waivers present, the State Board of Education to review those and approve or disapprove? And if time is of the essence at that juncture, do we need any language that tolls a timeline while the state board is considering the waivers? That's the second question.
Mr. Secretary, I was sort of thinking along the same lines there. And yeah, you know, I don't know if the within language is as compelling as not beyond 30 days or not to exceed 30 days. That might be one way to sort of promote a bit of urgency. The other thought that I had was, and this does not really address the Board of Education's timing. I don't even know if they have any specific criteria or timeline that they have to adhere to. That's an interesting question, but I was thinking an applicant will provide, this is under the interview, applicant will provide a presentation to Slib, which would include the completed application. Would include the application, because I guess we have incomplete ones coming to us as well, but include the application and any contemplated waivers. Mr. Secretary, that was in the form of a response to, I think, your question.
Yes, no, that's my response.
Would you agree?
I thought there was a question in there somewhere, but I'm not sure I know the answer either. But yeah, no, good points.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just
Yes,
add
Madam
that the 30 days, I believe that's set forth in the department's rules that they just promulgated. Some of these I think that's in section 6, maybe. The authorizer shall notify applicants within 30 days of submission whether the application is complete or incomplete. Is it in the, it may be in the statute too. I just found it in the rule.
Statute 21.3.307.
Question for the department. You're awfully quiet on this, so I'll give you an opportunity if you have any light you can shed.
Mr. Governor, we're just looking at the timeline. The 30 days is, we have the 30 days at the department to review the application and get those to the Slib board. So there's not an additional 30 days there to do that report. That's all within the 30 days, and then we send it. I do believe that, and I don't have the wording in front of me, so I don't want to misquote, but I do believe it says that the state board will hear those waivers at their next scheduled meeting.
Okay.
Chairman, the statute provides that not later than 60 days after receiving an application for any charter school, which has been determined to be complete pursuant to Wyoming Statute 21.3.307B, the authorizer shall hold a public hearing on the application, at which time the authorizer shall consider the level of community and parental support, blah, 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 blah.
So, Mr. Secretary, it sounds like 60 days is contemplated in the statute. And, one of the concerns for at least two of the potential charter applications is that they'd like to be up and running this fall.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll have to pull it up here. The reason I had asked the question, because on the policy document that we're looking at, you have that second bullet point that says 30 days of submission to determine whether the application is complete or incomplete, that by the Department of Education. Then that third bullet point was what kind of threw me a little bit. And I don't know if we can work on that language to reflect what actually is the intent, because the young lady there at Department of Education just said, well, they thought they had 30 days, not 60. So I'm a little unclear on where the 60 comes in, but the language we have in this policy to me seems to say 60. And we just I just want to make sure we clean it up.
Secretary, the director can enlighten you on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we worked with Pat Miller on this too. Maybe Pat can, and McKenzie too. I don't think, or Jim's on too.
Yeah.
So
Pat.
perhaps, Pat, can you by chance shed some light on this?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jim Peters. Just the first time in. By the statute, the department has 30 days to determine whether the application is complete. And the statute requires within 60 days of an application being determined to be complete, the authorizer shall hold a public hearing, and then the final decision has to be completed within 90 days of when the date the application is determined to be complete. So I don't believe we're able to toll any of the provisions, the timelines in the statute. But with respect to the bullet that the secretary mentioned for providing a report within 30 days after the application is deemed complete, I think we envision that would be an additional 30 days after the application was deemed complete. And part of that would be the first 30 days of the 60 days in which to hold a public hearing and 90 days to make a final decision. If the Department of Education is intending to submit the report at the time it determines the application is complete, I certainly think we could amend that policy if the board chooses.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just a second. Let me ask if the secretary has any follow-up on that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I thought I just heard was, and I could be wrong, but we're a total of 90 from perhaps the date the department first receives the application. I'm not arguing the timeline as far as what it should be. To me, it's confusing. And I just want to make sure that we make it as clear as possible. So that's my only point.
All right, thank you. Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that in the timeline hasn't been talked about is the State Board of Education approving or denying these waivers. And I'm wondering if they can do this concurrently when I would hope that the application put forth the waivers that the potential charter organization is contemplating, so the Board of Education can immediately work on that at the same time everything else is going on. Because if it isn't that way, then this thing can turn into a 2-year process depending on, when they get the application and when we meet. I mean, I just want to make sure that we're not trying to gum up the works here.
I think we could certainly request, but I don't think we have any way to compel. Mr. Peters, would that be a correct statement?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe that would be correct.
Okay.
Governor Gordon, though, I would like to say from our perspective, we're going to move this through as quickly as we can on our end. We've got all of the people who are going to be reading the application already committed and ready, and we're planning on. We're not going to take 30 days to determine whether the applications are complete. I mean, that might give us that long, but that's not how the process is going to work. So we're going to move along a lot faster than that. And then the waiver thing doesn't have to be within the 90 days. And then one final thing, there's been several things discussed here. As far as the interview questions, the National Association for Charter School Authorizer has a capacity interview protocol with questions and all of that on it. So it's coming up with the interview protocol and that kind of thing isn't very difficult.
Thank you.
And also,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Superintendent. And then
Just
you get going. Elaine, was that you? So I can recognize you afterwards?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Superintendent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just two things quick. So that's good to hear, Bill. Just because there's 30 days doesn't mean you're going to take the full 30 days. And secondly, just still in the clarification mode here. So make sure I'm clear. The first 30 days, if that much was needed, is to notify the applicants whether the app's complete or not. The second 30 days, if the app is complete, the DOE has 30 days then to submit a prelim recommendation. Am I correct so far in understanding that?
If I might comment. As I understand it, there are 3 parts to the application, if you will. There is the written application, the interview, and the public hearing. So by the application being completed in 60 days, we're talking about all 3 components being completed within 60 days, and then the SLIB making their determination within the next 30. So max, the way we're reading it, would be 90 days. Am I correct?
Okay. Yeah, and what was that? I'm sorry, was that Bill talking or Sean?
That was Bill.
Bill, okay. And what am I looking for here? The waivers, if there are any waivers, those have to go before the state board somewhere within that 90-day period or within one of those 3 30-day periods.
They will go within that 90-day period.
Somewhere within that 90-day period. Okay. Yes. Okay.
We will send them to the school board.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that end part.
So in section 9 of the rules, it states that the applicant shall submit a waiver request to the State Board of Education no later than 10 days after the application is approved. So once the SLIB board approves the application, they have up to 10 days to submit those waivers to the state board, the documentation to the state board, and those will go through the department to the state board.
Got it. Okay, got it. That's clear and helpful. Thank you. And then one other thing, did I hear correctly or did I not hear correctly over the phone here? Mr. Chairman, did I hear someone say that these are not the applications aren't being submitted for to start school this fall, correct? It's for the following school year. Is that correct?
That could be correct. I think at one point I was told that at least the Cheyenne school, they had hoped to get it up running as soon as possible, even this fall. But they may have changed their timeline.
Okay. Yeah, that's news to me. I've been hearing all along with both the Casper School and the Cheyenne School that it would be a year from this fall. That with these being BCSI schools, working with Hillsdale College, that Hillsdale College requires their schools to have a head of school or headmaster, principal, whatever you want to call them, to be in place a year before they start school. So I just wanted to clarify on that. That to me would be really rushing it to have this up and running by this fall. And I haven't heard that up to this point. So that was just a bit of a surprise and a needed point of clarification.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Elaine, you started to say something. I didn't know if you.
Mr. Chair, Governor Gordon, that actually was the issue I was going to raise as well, that these are not opening until, not in operation until 23.
Okay.
Next fall, not this fall. Yeah.
All right.
Governor Gordon, if I might add, in conversations with one of the founders of one of the charter schools, they said that Hillsdale College is really pushing them to have it done by October 1st and have the head of school in place by then, if at all possible, because that's kind of their protocol. And so the sooner we can get these done, the better. I don't think we want to extend this process any longer than necessary.
Very good. Thank you. Further comments, considerations?
Mr. Chairman, I would just concur with what Bill said. I would echo that. I think that I would want to encourage that as well.
Very good. All right. Well, Madam Director, I commend you and the Department of Education and Pat and Jim for putting together the bones of policy. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is. The only thing I could see, what I otherwise thought was a very complete process, was the recommendation that I had is that the presentation of the slip would include the application and any contemplated waivers. So at least we'd be aware of those. And I guess those would come as part of the application too. So. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Chairman, I would move the director's recommendation with regard to approving the State Loan Investment Board's charter school policy and procedures with an effective date of July 13th, 2022.
I would second it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. If that's the case, any further discussion? Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh, it's been moved and I'm a little bit out of order. Again, is there any public comment?
Mr. Chairman, no hands up currently.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baum. Well, with that, we have a motion on the table. All in favor signify by saying aye. I see
aye.
a thumb. An aye from the superintendent, thumbs up from the auditor, the treasurer, the secretary, and myself. So we have a passed motion. Thank you very much. Madam Director, is there anything else to come before us?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the agenda for the special meeting of the State Loan and Investment Board for today.
All right, thank you. Any further comment from members of the board or anyone else? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. It's been moved. It's been seconded. Mr. Treasurer Meyer, is that a second or is that a hand up?
Yeah, that's two fingers. That's a second.
Okay, thank you.
Both hands on the wheel.
I'm not driving. I got a driver.
I thought you were in England or something.
With an eye or a thumbs up, and I think we are adjourned.
Yeah.